Hi everyone, this is K-Dart at Shepherd University's Fastener Lab, and this is a video that continues our introduction into Meshmixer. And in this video specifically, we're going to talk about how we can start separating some of these objects that we've brought in through photogrammetry, and then how we can reorient some of those objects as well. So let's get back into Meshmixer, and we can see here our piece is still floating in space, and we've got all these random objects. So I'm going to make sure that the show object browser is in, and I'm going to go to my edit tools. And in here, what I'm specifically looking for is separate shells. Now, right now, these are essentially, one way to think about it is a bunch of grouped objects, so that when I move things, they're all moving together because they came in as one sort of, quote, one object. But we can separate that, meaning separating shells is separating things that are not connected together. So back at edit, separate shells, and it broke this down into all its varying objects. So you can see all the various shells. Now, typically the first one is generally going to be the largest one. Now, that's the only one we care about. In your model, it might be different. You might have a lot of objects, and you might actually want to keep a couple of them together and then try to regroup them somehow. So we're going to essentially hide this one. And notice that when you select it and it's you hide it with this little eye cursor here, it'll still kind of show its ghostly form, but we're just hiding it so that we just don't see it. And I'm going to hold Shift and select all these other objects. And now when you select multiple objects, a little window comes up here with some other editing tools, like you can combine them, which is in a way thinking of like grouping them, not necessarily joining them. And you can also transform them, duplicate them, and all that jazz. We're actually just going to trash them because we don't want them. So we're going to show our cherub, select it, and for now we'll just move this window out of the way. And we can start transforming this and moving it so it's in a good orientation. So I'm going to go back to edit, and I'm going to go to transform. Now, sometimes what can happen is when you import a file, you might see the grid, but you have no idea where the actual object is. So first thing to do is, if you don't see it, is to open your object browser, make sure you see it. And the second thing is to open up transform, and then come down and enable snapping might not be on in the transform menu. So turn enable snapping on and make sure absolute coordinate / sizes are on. And that's going to tell you where it is in relation to a coordinate system in the 3D space. So for example, right now, this object is floating a ½ millimeter, 5 millimeters, -3 millimeters in the XYZ direction. So what you also want to make sure you're doing is go to world frame and make sure that when you translate these things, they translate in relation to the world frame. So what I'm going to do is, if your object is hard to find, is to just go 0, just move everything to 0. And that's going to move everything to relative location that's easily visible and something you can find. So I'm going to zoom in, and what's nice is you've got these options. Each one of these is a coordinate system. So right now you've got your X, Y, and Z. Now I'm not exactly sure which one's X or Y at the moment. The colors usually indicate which one it is. Typically, red is X, green is Y, and blue is Z. But, you know, because this object is just kind of weirdly floating in space. But if you're holding it to the world frame, then it'll be green should be Z. Anywho, what you can do is the arrows allow you to move. The arcs allow you to rotate. And the triangles allow you to move it within that plane specifically. And the rectangles, where are they? Where did they go? They are gone. There are little squares here. Local frame. Okay, so in the local frame, you have the option of scaling it, and you can scale it in a specific direction. So that really skews it. I prefer to work mostly in the world frame just because it's easier to kind of relate it to the grid or the world space. I'm going to turn off enable snapping just so that I can start orienting this. And I'm just going to move around and try to get it as close to that base as possible. This might take a little time to just see how you can orient it. You can also, if you want to change to a pretty shot-on view or straightforward view, is selecting one of these sides up here. We'll go home. Oops, I just wanted to pan. And yeah, it's looking pretty good. Could probably be just a hair straighter. Anywho, so what we can do next is accept. Now, anytime you edit it, the object in any fashion, whether it's edit or select, you just have to make sure you accept those changes. So I'm going to hit accept. And the next thing I want to go over is cutting out some other stuff. Like there's this bulge down here from photogrammetry process that we don't need. And the easiest way to get rid of it is to do the plane cut. And so you can see how there's now this plane that you can move up and down. And it's just like editing the transformation process is you can rotate this around, move it where you need to move it. In fact, I might just, a degree difference, we'll move it up. And that's looking pretty good. Now here you can cut or discard half. You can keep both. What we're doing is I don't really care about that bottom part. I'm just going to cut it. Now, if you wanted to save that bottom part for whatever reason, you can cut it. But you would have to, if it doesn't show up in your object browser, you would have to go back and do the explode shell. You can do a remeshed fill, fixed fill, and all that. We're just going to stick with remeshed and hit accept. And that does a nice job of just capping that bottom off. All right, so now we can kind of play around with our cherub and do some fun things. Or if we need to continue editing it or fill some holes, we can manage that and figure that out. So I will see you in the next video.